I would like to thank everyone for coming tonight, Indian Harbor for giving us the opportunity to give the presentation to those of us that are here tonight. Thank you very much. It's so nice to talk to a live audience.
You need your mic on.
Is it on?
Oh, no, it's not a speakers. It's just being recorded.
And also for those that are hopefully watching it live stream. We're very excited to be here. We want to give an update to the presentation that we gave, actually it was a couple of years ago, where we told you what our plan was and to let you know how far we got on our first leg, and unfortunately had to come to an abrupt stop due to COVID. We, not knowing really what to expect, I can say that our trip has so far exceeded our expectations. And there have been other lectures on world travel, and we each look for what our interests are, and for Rick and I, we found that we were really looking to immerse ourselves into the culture, the people, to get an education, and to do a little philanthropy work. I am currently wearing a traditional outfit from the Cunayala people of the San Blas Islands in Panama, and we spent a month there, and it was an exceptional time, and we really did get to meet some fabulous people, which you'll get to see. Our presentation, and we hope to show you our experience from the U.S. coast, and we have a map over here all the way. We only got as far as Ecuador because of COVID, and down in Bahia de Caracas, which we'll show you all that. But not all of our travel was palm trees, sand beaches, and teal waters. And we're going to show you that as well, because actually Indian Harbor played a role in that, which we're very excited to share with you. The boat is currently in Bahia de Caracas in Ecuador at the La Amistad Marina. Actually, no, that's not the picture. That's actually in Florida. She is there, has been there since the end of September, and we will keep her there as long as we can until we can get back. The world, once it opens, we'll be able to get back on our travels. We were very lucky actually to come home when we did. There are many boats currently stranded out in the Pacific, and with cyclone season now coming upon us, we feel very blessed that we're not in that situation where we have to try and find a place to be. Our boat is in Ecuador, which is near the equator, where there are no cyclones and hurricanes, although they have earthquakes. So at this point, we're hoping for the best. So our trip is on hold, and then until the world opens. And without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to Rick.
What mic?
Yeah, that mic. Okay. So just a brief background. I don't know if anyone was here for our first seminar. Was anyone here and got the, okay. So we kind of gave through an idea of where we wanted to go and did a lot more information on getting the boat ready and what we needed to do. So the boat's a 43-foot cutter, a brewer cutter, and I've had it for probably, 18 years now, slowly rebuilt everything on it, and we finally felt we were ready to go. Even though we left, we still had more work to do that we were planning to do in Florida where it got warm, but you'll understand. The crew. The permanent crew is Candy and myself, and you can see from the picture on the left that Candy and I have known each other since high school and reconnected late in life. So I'm very lucky to find someone who's crazy enough to sign up for a circumnavigation with me. Our visiting crew was my daughter and her husband. As part of our trip, we were supposed to get down to Florida and then get to Australia and then get back and then leave with them and everything, and things got kind of messed up. But they met us down in Florida, hopped on the boat, and came with us all the way through Panama. So we had a lot of fun times together and a lot of close quarters, which we'll kind of talk about later. And then later we had some good friends of Candy's from Reading who came and met us, and they came through the Panama Canal with us and went to the Las Perlas Islands on the back of Panama. So we'll see a little of them too. And then we have some uninvited crew. We had Paul the persistent pelican, who just really wanted to join our crew, and Bob the blue-footed booby, who landed on our deck and also decided he didn't want to leave. So we wanted to do this. Overall plan was west about circumnavigation, heading through the South Pacific and around through Indonesia, and then down to the bottom of South Africa and over to Brazil and then up to the Med and all. But so instead of going this far, we've gone this far. But it was a hell of an adventure so far, and we're pleased. So here's where we've been, and here you can see we actually have a Delorme Garmin repeater that's a little tiny satellite unit that sends where we've been, and I've actually got the exact track of everywhere we've been. So it's really nice to be able to relive that and to share that. So here's some of the stops. So we'll go through them as we're on our way. So we started off by having this presentation here. So we were just about done the boat. Everything was ready. We were loaded up. We were really, really feeling comfortable. We were going to head off, get down to Florida, and then fly to Australia. But what we didn't say when we were here is that we were frauds. That on the way here, the wind was blowing straight at us, and we had to goose the engine. And as we goosed the engine, the temperature gauge went way up, and it turned out we had problems with our heat exchanger, and we had salt water leaking into our fresh water system, and it required this huge repair. So here we're standing up chatting about our wonderful world trip, and all the time we're thinking to ourselves, holy cow, we have no idea what is in store and what the boat needs to have done to it. So I can tell you that it did require a major overhaul to the engine, and we had to change all the heat exchangers. And of course, it's nice when you can order a part and it comes through and it's exactly the same as the one that you had on it. And in this case, the old parts were no longer available, and the new parts were taller than the old parts, and I had to literally rip the pilot house floor apart and cut beams to make room for the new engine parts. So it was about as crazy as it could be. We were at Norwalk Cove.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So I had good people and people I trusted working on the boat. So we said, okay, our concept of getting to Florida and flying to Australia is gone. We're going to fly to Australia from New York, and we're going to leave the boat here. They're going to work on the boat, and when we come back, we have this little tiny window to get the boat back together, get a new floor and rebuild the pilot house floor, and then get on our way before the weather window closed and we couldn't sail south. So we were able to pull that off, believe it or not, and we loaded the boat on a slightly snowy, icy morning, and got the boat, somewhat put together. Our one friend came down to meet us at the crack of dawn, and he slid down the ramp on his butt in the ice, and so we had a propane heater down in the pilot house with a hose running down from the cockpit, so we could keep our pilot house at 70 degrees, and we kept turning that on and on, and we headed off.
We left on Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, yes.
I see that.
So we shot through, we hit the tide just perfect going through Hellgate, and we shot through New York City at 14 knots, and we said, woohoo, this is it.
It was actually a beautiful experience because it was sunset and the views of New York City in Christmas Eve going through Hellgate. It was actually very, very pretty. It
was crisp. So we headed offshore and we went down the Jersey Shore, and this is how we managed to survive. The pilot house has a seat/bunk in the pilot house and a nav station on the other side. So while one person is navigating and monitoring the radar and all the good stuff, and ducking out every now and then to do a prairie dog peek around, the other is sleeping in the pilot house with a leak cloth right next to each other, so we're always 3 or 4 feet from each other. So that way, if Candy's got a problem, she can just pound on me and wake me right up. So that was how we got going. And we, of course, had to decorate for Christmas, so we decorated for Christmas, and Candy did roast stuffed chicken and vegetables, this beautiful meal, but it was blowing about 28 to 30. We had just a little staysail up, the wind vane steering the boat. We were heeled over and doing about 8 knots. Candy's preparing this sumptuous meal, and we ate it sitting on the pilot house floor because it was too rough to eat it. We were eating out of bowls as the boat just plowed its way through the waves. So that was actually really, really fun. It was a Christmas absolutely we won't remember. So when
was one person always up during that?
Yeah, one person was always up. So
24/7.
Was never
rather than doing set watches the way many boats do, Candy doesn't sleep really well during the day when it's bright out, and I can sleep anytime, anywhere. So what we do is I would do much of the or the night stuff, and Candy would do the day stuff. So I'd stay up till like 4 in the morning, and then she'd get up and then and I sleep during the day. And we were able to just base it on, do you need sleep or not? And we would catch up with each other, and it worked well. But
And traditionally, I get seasick in the first 4 days, always.
yeah.
So we take these Sturgeon pills, which you can't get here, but we get them overseas, and that makes me pretty loopy for a couple of days. So I struggle, and he unfortunately, has to stay awake a lot more. But after the 4 days, I'm pretty good to go, and we get back to a regular schedule.
But Candy prepared tons of pre-cooked dinners that were all just the right size to either pop in the oven and warm up or pop in the microwave and heat up. And then it would be, a really nice warm dinner. Even though you're offshore, we're having really good food. So, and by freezing those, and we've got a big monster freezer that can keep a ton of food cold, it would just defrost it during the day, heat it up for dinner. We'd sit and watch a movie in the pilot house on the PC screen there with the surround sound and
Quite
everything.
civilized, quite
It was awful. And then we'd take turns with the watches. So that's how we worked.
Provisioning the boat was actually a nice an experience for me. It was easy doing the shopping here, and there's a lot of food in cans underneath the floorboards of the boat. I figured out all the sizing, and I put them all in plastic bins, so there's canned meats and fruits and vegetables and enough to help us survive for months if we had to. And we have a water maker to make water, so we'll learn more about that later. But yes, pre-cooking meals is the trick for the first, as much as you can.
So it was smooth sailing for Christmas Day, 37 degrees, and before we left, we wanted to put some pad eyes in around the boat so we could lash stuff up and keep it from taking off on us and hang netting. And we for the life of us, before we left, couldn't find the box of pad eyes. So we'd spent 2 or 3 hours tearing the boat apart. This is after we'd loaded everything in the boat, going through everything, trying to find this stupid box of little eyes so I could screw them into the bulkheads. And so we said, okay, we got to go without them. We just got to call our shots here. And what happened is when you're heading down the Jersey Shore and it's blowing almost 30, and you're going through these waves, all of a sudden everything started to come off
Shift.
of everywhere and end up on the cabin sole. So we ended up with nice big plastic bins that were nicely loaded. All had to stack them up and try and hold things in place, and it got pretty crazy. So we were heading down, and what happened is that nasty waves and everything also stirred up all the gunk that was in our fuel tanks. So I had put in a fuel purification system and had run it regularly, but the stuff must have been really gunked up to the walls of the tanks, and the pounding through the waves broke it free, and the fuel purification system couldn't keep up with it, so it clogged our fuel filters. So after changing the filters probably 4 times in the seas, I changed the big filters 4 times and the engine filters twice. It was pretty obvious that we were going to have to go get some help. So what we did is we said,
On top of that,
oh,
we didn't beat the storm that we had hoped to beat to get down in time. The
didn't?
storm had caught up to us.
yeah. We found a weather window and we were trying to get down around the bottom of Hatteras and then know that we could go tuck in once we got down. And the storm started to hit the third or fourth day. We felt the low started to come through and we were out of the high. So we felt we needed someplace to go ditch in. So what we did is we went around to the very bottom of Cape Hatteras. There's a place called Cape Lookout. And in the bottom of Cape Lookout is this little place where you can go in and anchor, and it's like a harbor of refuge. So at night, about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, in close to 25 knots of breeze with just the staysail up, we sailed around the corner into Cape Lookout and had to push the boat up.
We're going to
Well-
back up. We're going to back up on that story.
Yeah.
We're going to back up on that story.
Go ahead.
He's not telling the truth. It was a horrible storm. We were out in our foul weather gear, bouncing back and forth, and we hadn't had a chance to put the navigation system in the cockpit yet.
That was slated for Florida.
That was a Florida project. So we had to use our tablet to try and navigate, but of course we didn't have power up in the navigation system either. So Rick said, well, we better save the power for when we pull into the anchor area, so we'll turn it off and we'll just go by compass. So we were, for a number of hours, we're going by compass, and the wind was against us, and then captain here decided, well, maybe it might be a good idea if we call Sea Tow and Coast Guard and find out if everything's coming along well. And they said, yes, that they could see us, that the channel markers were as they were supposed to be, but it was pretty rough, and they weren't interested in coming out and helping us.
They what?
They weren't interested in coming out and helping us, so we were on our own. Well, we had no engine, and we
So
were
you were just sailing?
we
They're
were
just sailing.
sailing and battling upwind.
Why wouldn't they come out?
I missed that part.
The engine had stopped because
The fuel filters were clogged,
Oh,
and
that killed
and
That
it
killed
killed the
the
engine
engine.
completely. So I
So we
changed the
were-
filters, got it running, and then 10 minutes later it would just stop.
So we were sailing upwind in this horrible weather, and we were getting closer, but of course we couldn't quite tell because our navigation, we had to turn it off.
All the navigation stuff is down in the pilot house, and
In a
we're in the
box.
cockpit.
Is this at night?
And,
Yes,
yeah, and we have
9:30.
brand new B&G equipment all sitting in boxes
In
down
boxes.
below that hadn't been installed
So
in the
I
cockpit.
finally I was very nervous being a more of a novice sailor into this first experience with a storm with no engine. And I said, do you mind if we could please turn on the navigation system just to make sure we're going in the right way?
And
We were heading towards the beach.
there
The
was
current-
we
the
were
current was against us.
parallel the beach and slowly getting swept in towards the beach. And so then what we did is we just sailed up into round the bight. And since the Coast Guard had told us that the buoys were in station and there were no shoaling to worry about, we then just came up and we shot the boat up into the wind. And I said, Candy, you've got to go on the helm. I've got to go up on the bow and drop the staysail and drop the anchor. And she said, okay, could you give me just 1 second? And she turned around and went
I lost everything.
over the rail. And then she came.
I was terrified.
Then she came back and said, I'm okay, and got on the wheel.
Wait, so this is in the middle of the channel.
No, we're
we haven't
coming
gotten there
along.
yet.
Yeah, we're inside the sandbank, trying to come around the hook and trying to ditch up and in and get the boat as far up in the bight as we could to drop the anchor.
Why
So
did you decide to go in January?
there was a window, or else you blow the season and you lose a year, because the whole idea of getting through the Panama Canal and into the South Pacific
Okay.
is weather window oriented with their typhoon season. So you have a very narrow weather window to try and make the leaps, or else
Everything's got to go.
you blow it all off. Yeah, so this was do or die. So we made it up inside. Candy slammed the boat up into the wind. I dropped the staysail, or dropped the anchor down, and then dropped the staysail, and we settled off on 200 feet of chain. And we spent 3 days there waiting for the storm to blow through. So
Hold on. It jumps past these important things. After that trauma, I went downstairs and remember the pad eyes we hadn't found?
Yeah.
Well, everything had come off every shelf and had broken open, had smashed our dinette to pieces, and all the books, everything we bought, canned food, everything was all over the floor in one big jumbled mess.
Oh, no.
I couldn't even walk
it was a
forward.
mess.
It was like called
It was like
trash
climb on the
floor.
around the settees to get around the pile in the bottom of the floor.
I looked up at Rick. The only door that was open was the bathroom. Pardon me,
No way.
The
the
head.
head. And I walked in and I closed the door and I screamed louder at the top of my lungs than I've ever screamed. What the hell am I doing here?
Did it feel good?
It did. Because
I'm
I
in
came
the-
out, I closed the door and I went, okay, I'm ready.
I'm in the pilot house and I'm hearing her scream, what am I doing? This is crazy. I'm nuts. Why am I here? The whole deal. And I'm thinking, okay, this is it. It's over. Before it even began, it's over. And Candy comes out and says, nope, I'm good. Let's clean up.
It did take us those 2 days to pull the boat back together, all the pieces, and he was able to get the filters cleaned once again so that we could actually motor our way to the town marina in Beaufort, North Carolina.
So now we have the engine running. We took our time. We went into Beaufort. We got there just in time where they were going on Christmas break. So as they were going on Christmas break, they said, oh, here's your slip. Here's your thing. Plug in. Don't problem. And here are the keys for the yard van. And they gave us their van
We'll see
for
you
the
in a week.
week. And
Next slide.
so they came back. So here was the marina. So they came back after New Year's. So we spent New Year's and went down to Morehead City, which is the next big city right next to Beaufort. And they have an annual New Year's Eve party where instead of lowering the ball in Times Square, they lower the crab pot from the boom of a
All lit
crane.
up. It's hilarious.
So they've got this crab pot with a big plastic crab in it, and they blinky lights, and they lowered it down, and the whole town erupts in applause, and it was really a fun time. We had a great
We were
time.
very
there.
lucky, actually. We belong to a number of organizations, and they have port officers of a lot of these wonderful cities. And we met the port officer for the Ocean Cruising Club, and they took us out to dinner. They brought us to their homes, so we had a delightful time. It was really lovely.
It was excellent. But meanwhile, I had a lot of work to do. So we had a company going to come and suck all the diesel out of the boat, purify it, suck it all back in again, and there were no inspection ports in the tanks. So I pulled out my big hole saw set and a 1/2-inch drill and proceeded to drill through the tops of the aluminum tanks and mount the new fittings, the new inspection ports in there. So you can see the middle pictures are the before and after pictures. We were shiny, clean, and spotless. And it was a major undertaking, took pretty much all of a day. But then the engine ran beautifully, and we never had a problem again. So it was a blessing in disguise that it happened when it happened, and we were, glad to have it over with. We were on our way. So we left Beaufort, North Carolina, and we headed straight down to St. Augustine, Florida. So we were heading down along the coast, and ultimately came into St. Augustine. Well, going down the coast was really fun because it was getting warmer. We were shedding all of our clothes. The heater had to go off. We dolphined in the bow. I mean, all of a sudden it started being beautiful out. But going through at night, I had plotted a course to head down through the course, and we were basically turning the autopilot, or the wind vane steering, to stay on the dotted line. So the wind vane staying on the dotted line within 4 or 5 degrees. So it was pretty excellent setup. But we were
Radar only went on once in a while.
Yeah.
And when I came on watch, it was dark. And by the time that the sun started to rise, I suddenly started seeing these things in the middle
In the distance.
of the ocean. And although they showed up on the chart, I come to find out they were unlit and no AIS. They are abandoned naval towers that they used for practice. There were dozens of them.
and these things
And
are the
by the-
size of oil rigs.
Yeah, they're huge. And when I saw them in the daylight, I looked back on the chart and realized I'd been going through a minefield. I never hit one. And I was terrified to think if we'd hit one of these suckers.
So those things aren't lit up?
They're not.
No
lit, and
lights,
there's
no
no
nothing,
AIS.
no anything.
How far,
You know,
how far down are
We,
they?
we were 100. Look on this chart. On this chart, you can see we were 59.73 miles offshore. So way off. They're in 114 feet of water, and they're huge towers
Just damn
coming out
lucky I never
of
hit
the
one
water.
on the way down.
So I had plotted the course to go right between them. The furthest ones out were pretty far out, but there were a lot along the coastline. And these were what the Navy had used for airplane runs to try and do bombing exercises and things. So that was kind of exciting. So then we finally made it down to St. Augustine, and I should be able to get this a little further. Maybe I can't.
Then turn it off.
No, this one runs too long, so I'm just going to skip it. But a friend of my sister's down in St. Augustine was able to do a drone video shot of the boat, which was pretty nice in the St. Augustine. So when you get down to St. Augustine, they do a whole Christmas, New Year's where they dress all the trees, all the stores everywhere in beautiful white lights. So we happened to be there just at the right time for their festival of lights, and it was crazy nice. And my sister and her husband are both chefs, so they would have these wonderful dinners for us. We got to stay at their house while we got to tear up the boat again and start to do more projects and
Like
things.
put in the navigation system and
Yeah.
do things like that.
So Candy had to go to Australia, and while she was away, I started installing the water maker, which I had delivered down there. I had the new B&G system in the cockpit, so I had redundant B&G from down below and up top, all the nav stuff. I was pretty busy bee. And then after somewhere in the middle of there, my daughter decided to get married, so she was spent down the cruising kitty a little bit. And so they came back after a whirlwind honeymoon in their RV, came back to help us, and we were sanding the companionway doors. We rebuilt all the winches on the boat. We installed a new wind generator on the boat, and we installed these new stainless steel grates which drop down into the companionway slots, and we can actually lock ourselves in the boat at night. Should anyone board us, they can't get down below without great difficulty. So we had seen that on someone else's boat and said, nope, we've got to do this. It's highly recommended when you're doing this kind of cruising to at least stall someone from going down below. So we had a really good time doing that, and we had the boat pretty much torn up again with all this installation stuff coming on, but my sister and her husband would prepare these wonderful meals and bring them down to us on the boat because they love sitting on the boat for the sunsets, and we'd end up with these huge feasts in the cockpit. So, it was a good way to end a very productive and busy day. So I also finished putting in the single sideband and got all that to work, and it took two of them in the middle to work on the main sheet winch and get that all back together and all. So then it was time to go. So we got ourselves ready, and we headed out through the St. Sebastian Bridge of Lions on the river there, and my sister was able to see the boat coming down through the channel, and she was up on the bridge and took a video of us leaving, and she blew us a kiss, and that was farewell. So it was pretty
I was
crazy.
flying. If anyone notices, the flags were flying. I had the undercover yacht club flag.
Yeah. So,
There she goes.
and that was it. And then we headed under the bridge, and we were off. So here was on board. While we were going, it was really nice to have some really young and enthusiastic, athletic people to hoist the sails and do all the heavy, hard work. So we kind of got very spoiled quickly with that, and that was fun. But everything was working, and we were now to the point where 95% of everything on the boat was working, which is pretty rare on a boat. So with the crew, we headed down outside the Bahamas, outside of everything, and headed for Turks and Caicos, because that was pretty much halfway between Panama. So we'd go from St. Augustine to Turks and Caicos through the Windward Passage, which is between Cuba and Haiti, and then straight down to Panama.
It was an 8-day trip from St. Augustine to the Turks and Caicos.
And it was great having extra people on crew so that our watches were much longer, and we were able to get more time off and get a lot more sleep. So we were becalmed at one point, and Chrissy and Rick decided to go swimming in 9,000 feet of water. But we had a great time. So we wanted to get we had to diesel for a while, so we decided to go to Provinciales in Turks and Caicos. So it's on the far left-hand side of the islands there. You can see where that little point comes down. The blow-up of that point is in the upper right. And there's a little anchorage in there. So we came down around the corner and came up just at sunset, anchored right in there. Was fine for the night. It was a little rock and rolly, but it wasn't too bad. And then the next morning we headed into the marina. So we followed our way in, and it was careful threading our way in because the water was not that deep. We had about 1.5 feet. We had to really play the tide right. Once we got into the marina, there was tons of water in the marina, but the entrance was very, very tight. So
I found it interesting that we had a police escort, and I was a little worried why. But we come to find out that the police leave all their boats in there, so they were just making it nice.
yeah, there were about 6 big gunboats all inside there. So that was fun. But they had washers and dryers. We could go shopping. We did some exploration and adventuring. We just had a really nice time. And
I even got to work.
Yeah, Candy had her laptop with her, so she plugged in and was working for a couple of days. So we went down to the next island right off of that was Salt Key.
Grand Turk.
Oh, Grand Turks.
Grand Turk, pardon.
Yeah, Grand Turks, and then ultimately to Salt Key. So Salt Key is where they used to have the salt baths, and they would let the water dry out and evaporate, and then scrape all the salt off the bottom. That the industry has been long dead, but they used to have carts that were pulled by burros that would load all the salt into it. Well, all the salt people have gone. All the people who work there are gone. There's only 6 people on the island, but there are hundreds of burros because they left them all. So at one point in the bottom left, I was under a tree to get out of the sun while the kids were trying to kiteboard, and and two burros came to share the only tree in town with me. And the mother kept her distance. She kept me between her baby, so that or stayed between her baby and I.
They're extremely friendly, actually, and they followed us everywhere. So they were like pets. They were very sweet.
So that was fun. And then we found this nice restaurant and met the people, and they were wonderful.
Restaurant.
Yeah.
The only restaurant. Owned by a couple from North Carolina that went there on vacation, loved it so much they didn't go home. And they bought this property, and Ocean Air Restaurant, the best conch you'll ever have. Their chef is from Haiti, and he was just lovely. And the other gentleman we met there was Tim Hunt, and he is a
Fifth generation.
fifth generation of the family that ran the salt industry there. That's called the White House. It's 20,000 square feet. It was their private residence as well as where they kept all the salt waiting for the ships to come in to deliver it. But it has obviously seen better days. And this poor gentleman has taken it upon himself to renovate it by himself. We got a tour of it, and I wish him luck. I don't know if he'll ever get it done before he dies.
It's got huge wood beams and a concrete roof, and he's up mixing concrete and bringing it up and pouring it on the roof, trying to build the roof back up. Just hurricane after hurricane come through there, and he's got this dream, and God bless him, but it looks monumental. So we did the next island down was called Big Sand Key. And Big Sand Key was a bird sanctuary island where we could anchor off, and this was our very first experience of having our own island completely to ourselves, no one else there. So we anchored off, fairly far because it was kind of shallow as you went in, and we got to walk along, and there was great snorkeling, really good rock formations. Just a beautiful time. So I think we stayed there 4 days or so, and then it was coming up to 4th of July, so we decided we were going to have a barbecue or bonfire for the 4th of July. So we found whatever sticks and things we could on this island and tried to light it up. And in spite of all our Boy Scout training, we tried starting fluid, paper, and even gasoline. We could not get this wood to burn because it was so damp and salt infused. There was just no way it was going to light. So we actually had to give up on our 4th of July bonfire system. So we left that, and then we were sailing for Panama. And
another 8-day cruise.
So it was hot. It was not all that much wind. At one point, we got the spinnaker up. We had dolphins sailing along with us. We were starting to see some whales as we were heading down. The wind vane's doing all the steering, and I can say that Candy's reading a book here in the cockpit, very, very studiously. The name of the book is How to Sail Around the World.
Light reading.
Great.
Yes.
Still trying to figure
So
it
as we approached Panama, you come in and there are hundreds of ships all anchored off the canal, and then there's these huge two jetties coming in. So inside around the back there were a bunch of sunken ships inside, but what we did is we went around the right of as you're looking at it, it's the left of the two jetties there. Way up inside is where Shelter Bay Marina is. And Shelter Bay Marina is geared for yachts, people, and boaters coming in to do the canal. They've got, rides to the restaurant or to the city to go provision. They've got a restaurant there, really cheap beer, pretty good Wi-Fi, and
They take
a
care
nice
of all of their
swimming pool.
immigration and customs issues, which is really nice.
So here was the marina, and it was just horrible there. So we stayed a couple of days and reprovisioned, and we got trips in, and we'll talk about that in a second. But they had a Wednesday night barbecue for all the cruisers where they would get the fires going and everyone would bring their own food. And we saw 50 or 60 people all there having these nice barbecues. And they said, oh, this is nothing. When we have the ARC rallies and some of the other ones, we'll end up with 200 and 300 people here. So it was crazy. And they were just very helpful, really nice people. Highly recommend them. A lot of fun. So we decided, oh yeah, you can say that.
We were on a mission, though, there. We had heard through the grapevine that if you were going to be sailing the San Blas Islands, which we had planned to do, that Jimmy Cornell is the Bible of world cruising, but there's someone called Bauhaus that had actually done a
Panama Cruising Guide, and it was a good-sized book.
And the only way to get hold of this information was through a private chip. It was not something you could buy. It was not something that was publicly available. You had to find someone who already had it, and it gets passed down from cruiser to cruiser. And knowing that we had to find this chip, I suspected it was probably somewhere at Shelter Bay. So I had to try and find who had it. And lo and behold, you offer people a few drinks at the pool, and I found the person who had it. So we were able to get a copy of the chip, which
So you
became
run to their
invaluable
boat with
to
a
us.
little memory chip, and they put it in their laptop and download. So what they was is in the cruising book, it had all these beautiful charts with all hand-noted things in it, and they were really accurate. Well, somebody had scanned them and then digitized them and had put latitude and longitude correlations on the charts and saved them as what they call a cap file. Well, now I could open it in OpenCPN on my laptop, and it would show us in the middle of the paper chart. And they were really, really accurate. So these digitized charts were the answer for everything we went on. And you could throw Navionics out the window. You could throw CMAP out the window. You could throw everything that was in the chart plotters out. We were living on two computers, both with redundant charts on it, using this paper book, and then the book in the cockpit. But the book had many things that were way out of date. So some islands said, hey, there's a free, an empty island, barbecues there, and all the cruisers get together. Well, we get there, and it turns out, well, there are a bunch of families living there, and yeah, they'll charge you $5 or $6 to get there, and they'll light the barbecue for you, but it's going to be what, $50 or $25. But I'm jumping ahead. So while we were in Shelter Bay, we got a ride to Cologne. Now, Cologne is kind of the Jersey City, type city of Panama, and it was pretty dark and nasty. There were some outdoor vendors or big stores where they were selling fruit stands and farmers markets and things. So we went in, and while we were trying to negotiate food, I recognized this guy came in and was starting to interject himself into our conversation. And an alarm went off in my head that he was the diversion, that we were about to get pickpocketed. And while he was talking between Candy and the other guy, I started looking around, and this lady came up behind me, and she was trying to go in my pockets and go get it. So I grabbed her backpack that was over her shoulder, pulled her up really close over my shoulder, and said, no. And then I let go, and she just took off through the thing. And while I turned around, he was gone also. So we were on to them, and we were like that close.
We weren't so lucky every time.
Yeah.
We'll tell about that
Yeah.
later.
So while my daughter and her husband were walking down one of the streets in Cologne, a taxi cab pulled up to them and said, you should not be on this street. If you stay on this street, you will die. Turn around and go back towards the middle of town. And they were like, okay, and they shot back out.
As a bit of an idea, I mean, on the corners of most of the streets in Cologne, there were police on motorcycles, but they were like in these.
They were armed with Uzis.
With Uzis. I
The,
mean,
the
it
guy
was
in the
not a
back of the
safe
motorcycle
feeling
had
at
a
all.
machine gun strapped to his chest, and every bank had somebody standing out front with a shotgun. They had armed guards with
This
shotguns
is one
at
of the
every
cities
bank.
I would say give it a miss.
Yeah. We definitely
And the
could
little guy
pass.
in the bottom, that's an
who's that?
anteater. He was in the middle of the road when we were driving. He was so
Yeah.
cute. I got a picture of him.
How big is that?
He was a good size. Yeah, he was pretty tall. So we decided we were going to the San Blas. Most of this whole portion of the trip was to get to the San Blas Islands. So the San Blas Islands are way down on the right-hand side in that set in there, and we had to get around the point of land to get there. So we started at the bottom, came around, and then had to go down into the
It's
islands.
160 miles, and there's 368 islands, 40 of which are inhabited, and only 6 with electricity.
So we were heading down, and one of the first harbors where we stopped around the way was called Portobello. Well, Portobello is where the old Spanish ships would come in to offload the gold from the Panama Peninsula. So this little harbor had 3 forts, one on either side, with cannons looking out onto it, and one down inside. So you could not enter or leave without being under the cannons, fire. So we were able to sail up and inside and anchor, and sure enough, I mean, I've been waiting my whole life to get these kind of pictures, with the boat in the background. And
They were built in the 1500s, and they are as you see them. There's no museum, there's no entry gate with a fee, there's no one there taking care of it. It's just there, and you just walk in and you just walk around. It's just like part of the town. It was really actually very interesting.
There were like guard huts at the top where you could look out, and these things were really antique. And you could see all the cannon in a row, and the boats with a couple of cruisers anchored out in the harbor. So we went from there down and finally entered into the San Blas Islands. So the San Blas Islands also are called Cunayala, and it's a part of Panama, but the indigenous natives have separated themselves from Panama. They are militarily protected by Panama, but they don't follow Panamanian rules, and they've broken away and practice their own religions, and they have their own government. So that's what was so much fun here, because you got to go back 200 and 300 years when you land on these islands. So bamboo huts, thatched roofs, people dressed in indigenous clothing, beautiful, pristine islands with palm trees everywhere.
So that the cruising companies are not allowed there, and they even now have put a stop to charter yachts stopping there. So really the only way you can get there now is by your own private yacht. These two ladies here, I had done my homework in the cruising books, and both of these ladies were in the cruising book. So the person on the left, her name is Lisa, and she was known to make the best molas in Panama. I had hoped I could find her, and lo and behold, the second day we were there, she rallied up in her ulu and said, "Molas for sale!" I said, "Come on board." And she did, and she brought her molas on board, and I ended up buying a few. But what is interesting about Lisa is that she's actually a man. And the rules in Cunayala is that the fifth, if they don't have sons, that the fifth daughter, if they have that many, would be treated as
the fifth
boy,
boy.
be treated as a woman, because they need the women to make the molas, because that is their way of making money to survive. That and coconuts. So she made the best molas, and she really did, and we had a great time. Now, the woman on the right, she was in the book as one of the oldest Cunayala, and she continues to make molas today. And when I saw her, I was so excited. I asked, you have to ask permission to take pictures. They do not allow it normally. She was happy to let me take a picture, and you never take a coconut, because coconut is worth money there. So you have to ask permission for everything.
They're owned by the families.
Yes.
And
each island is actually owned by families, and sometimes they're there, and sometimes they were not, and you had to be very respectful that they knew how many coconuts were on the island, and you didn't really dare go on, or even though there was no one there, you had to be very careful.
How old was this lady?
And
She was in her 80s.
yeah, she was ancient. And as you can see, Candy is somewhat vertically challenged.
Careful, you said
Candy is somewhat vertically challenged, and this lady was considerably shorter than Candy. And it turns out that the Cunayala are the second smallest group. The Pygmies are the smallest, and the Cunayala are the next smallest. So everyone we met, and as we walked through the villages, when they had the thatched roofs and all, we would go down between the buildings, and we had to walk through like this because the thatches all came down just to the point where it would whack us in the head. But they all scurried through without any problem.
There's only about 60,000 Cunayala, and they have their own language.
Even the men are very short?
Most of them are, yeah. Interestingly, the men dress Western. The women all continue to dress in
The older
traditional
women.
costume.
Yeah. So some of the islands actually have been started to be developed where there was westernization going on, but many of the islands, like the one on the bottom right, was a traditional family-owned run island where on the left-hand side, the father and mother would sell coconuts and molas, and then the father would whack the top off the coconut, and you'd wander over to the buildings on the right-hand side, and that's where the kids ran snorkeling expeditions on the sunken barge offshore, would fill your coconut with rum, and sell you fried fish or lobster for dinner. So they were very, very entrepreneurial. The kids are with it and see what's happening and want to have a better life for themselves, and they're not content to live on coconuts and mola. So, we're starting to see westernization happening, and the Panamanian government has put forth money for them to start to to put in solar panels and batteries and inverters, and we're starting to see satellite dishes show up and cell towers. So you see the older family, the older women dressed in their indigenous costumes. The next generation is wearing less, maybe just a mola, but not doing this. And the married women would have gold rings through their noses and big braids and huge.
And you have to have all your hair cut off.
Yeah, you
So
cut your hair
You
off.
always have a chopped off haircut and the ring, and actually they have braids all around their legs.
And now you're not seeing that in the second generation. On the third generation, the kids were just dressed in shorts and T-shirts, and they weren't going for it. And it's very much like the Native American Indians, where you can imagine them trying to hold on to their tribal lifestyle, but at the same time, society and technology and everything is knocking at the door. So we felt lucky to get there while we did. We have friends who were there in the 60s and 70s, and they said it was literally going back in time. And for us, you can see with these shots, it was really, as incredible as it looks. So, here's an island out in the middle. There's just one single family out there. And many of these families would run basically Airbnb. They would do day stays. So people would come from the mainland and come, and they would stay at one island, and maybe they'd have some activities and things there, volleyball nets and things, and dollar beers, which would always keep you. But then they would take a panga, which is a fiberglass dinghy with like a 25 horse on it, about 20 feet long, and they would roar over to one of the restaurant islands, and they would eat there. And then they would go off to another island and go snorkeling, and then come back and spend the night on the day stay island.
These are the islands on the western side, which are much more touristy and more traditional in appearance, with these sandy beaches and the palm trees. As you'll see as we head further east, it becomes a very different looking island.
So the second we would drop our anchor, the Kuna would come out in their ulus, which is a wooden dugout, and they would come to sell us fish or lobster. And it got to the point after a month or so there, we were like, lobster again, but we would negotiate 3 fish, 2 lobsters, and some squid for $20. So it was just unbelievable, fresh food. And the picture on the right, I can tell you, I've been waiting my whole life to take that picture of my boat, So here's an anchor in an ulu. Just a piece of coral rock, and that's where they throw it over with a piece of line, and that's their anchor. So the minute boats would pull into the harbor, what they would do is they would, all of a sudden the molas would come out for sale. So they would turn on the storefront, and the molas would all come out, and as we walked through, we would see, we'd go through, and you could see really good molas, and you'd see some that weren't so good, and they were willing to negotiate a little bit, and we bought quite a few. So here's just some more there.
This is the storm.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we were anchored in between 2 islands, and the wind had been fairly constant for a week or more. And what we didn't know is there was this thunderstorm kind of going to roar in, and in the middle of the night, we found ourselves, the wind veered considerably, and we had a fair amount of chain out, and all of a sudden we were getting precariously close to the shore, not really comfortable because we were blowing between these 2 islands, and there was only maybe 200 yards between the 2 islands, and we were anchored in the middle. So having the young crew on board, they said, what can we do? What can we do? And I said, well, here, take this anchor. And I went digging through the lazarette and pulled out my big Danforth and gave them 200 feet of line and sent them off in the dinghy and said, go over there as far as you can until you run out of line, drop it down, and then come back here. So they did just that, and we put the anchor on the winch, and we cranked ourselves and brought ourselves back out into the middle. And it was fine. The anchors where we wanted to go had been taken, so we had to. It's first come first serve, and they're not always the best anchorages there. So you've got to take what you can get.
It's a lot of coral, you have to be really careful.
And you've got to sometimes stay up at night and really watch. What I would do is I would turn on Navionics on my little tablet. I would plug it in up at the bed, and I would turn the brightness down low, and I would roll over and be able to look at where we were on the chart plotter. Instead of getting up and looking and trying to line up lights the way we used to, now we just look at the chart plotter by rolling over. So the world has changed a lot. But So this was one of the restaurant islands. So here's where they serve fish and fish dinner, and you have your choice. You have fish, which means whole fish, fried, or you can have half a fish fried. That was it. And beer. I think the beer was $1, maybe $2.
Where do they get their fresh water?
They would go to the mainland. They would run in 55-gallon drums in these ulus and go get, and only how many islands? Only like 6 or 8 islands actually had fresh water. All the rest had to go from the
Some of them
mainland.
were lucky enough to actually have wells on the islands, but most of them had to bring it in.
Yeah, and the mainland was sometimes 15 miles away. So when they make a water run, it was like a major water run. And they would also bring 55-gallon drums
Diesel and
of
gas.
gasoline, so they would power their generators, and they'd run the generator for a couple hours every now and then to keep the beer cold, because you got to have happy clients. So here's another. This is the barbecue island where we were going to go in and have a barbecue, and they had a bar set up there. Candy became the bar girl.
I moved them along.
And here's they set the fire for us and got everything going, but it was beautifully maintained and really nicely decorated. But at the same time, while we had beautiful beaches, we also had a lot of plastic pollution. They usually burn all their waste, and they burn all the palm fronds that fall, and they, every day somebody starts a fire. Well, they tried to burn the plastic and found that it was letting off poisonous gases and things, and they have no concept of how to take care of the plastic in
No
the air.
waste management
So,
systems.
and Panama has not helped them at all. So, even in Paradise, you still see more single-use bottles. So we swore off single-use bottles. We live out of our water tanks, through water filters, out of our own jugs all the time. And we will not buy water bottles. So this was the day stay island, and you rent a hammock for the night, and you'd sleep in there with 10 of your best friends. But they had a lot of cold beer, and they also sold a lot of beaded bracelets and wristlets, as well as molas. And Rick and Chris on this side were cleaning an octopus that they were going to cook for dinner. And the secret with octopus is cook it a really, really long time to get it soft. In the middle of nowhere, we ran into this large pipe that they were working on the mainland, and it must have gotten away from them in a storm. And this was not rubber, this was like nylon and about this thick. And it must have cost a fortune, but it was just sitting out here in the middle of
I'm
nowhere.
just glad we didn't run into it at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we met a lot of the kids. Wherever we went, the kids followed us like we were the Pied Piper.
So now we've left the islands that just have 1 or 2 families on it. Now we're into communities where the islands are literally, there's no room to move. Every little space has got a house on it. They have their own, each island had its own government system. They had schools. They had, they call them supermarkets. They're really just homes or closets that people would set up on their homes to sell food. And we were getting low on provisions. So I was in search of. And I came to learn that when you get to an island, it isn't like you just say, where's the supermarket? You had to find the person that would tell you how to get there. And there's different levels of supermarkets. So I don't even know why I'm really calling bodegas is a better word.
Well, it was their living room,
it's-
and they would have a hole in the wall with a counter on it,
Yep.
and this person would be
And a
the
generator.
vegetable person.
Right.
And then 2 houses down would be the something else person. And then then Candy said, "Oh, we need chicken." They said, follow us." And they go through all the houses, and we end up at the chicken house.
Right. It was pretty funny, actually.
So Candy got chicken with
But
the
it
heads
comes with the
and
heads and the
feet attached. Yeah.
Protein.
There you go.
So here you can see all the little islands and things on it.
So they all have their outhouses.
This one you can see. These are little outhouses and things on the end. They have built bamboo stake little balconies out in the back, and that's their toilets. And so we came in from the backside and saw the very best of it all.
We stopped making water at that point.
Yeah. We would make water fresh water with our water maker in the deep water, and then when we got close to the islands, we would just use the water we had accumulated.
Not many cruisers go down this far. In fact, we were the only boat down there. And that's where we had to be a little more careful. But this is where we started to learn a lot more about the people, and we got to, maybe we were lucky enough to find someone who spoke English. Most of them spoke Spanish or Cunala. We had a harder time. I wish we'd spoken better Spanish. But it was learning more about the people there, which was very interesting, about how they got their independence and how they lived their lives there.
So these were the Colombian trading boats. So rather than Panama provisioning the Cunayala, the boats would come up from Panama or from Colombia, which was just 50, 75 miles down the coast, and come to every island and set up shop. So when they set up shop, they would come into the town, the hallways, or the common area, set up big plastic tarps, and then put all their goods and wares out there, and the Cunayala would come and they've saved their money from selling fish, lobster, and coconuts and molas, and buy clothing and sundries.
So this was
So-
Walmart Cunayala style.
So you can see the towns were very poor. I mean, water in the walkways and things. I had one picture of a lady who was standing in ankle deep water trying to hang her laundry out on her thing because her back of her lot was underwater after a rain. I mean, it was really primitive living. The biggest areas in the center of town were basketball courts or volleyball courts. So, and that's where they would have their town meetings.
So I was really anxious to sort of learn more about their religion. I know that the Methodist missionaries had pretty much made their way into Cunayala. And when I saw this little setup here and it actually said church was at 6, I said to Rick, I want to go. So we had to find out from one of our sources what to wear. We had to be long pants, long sleeves. I mean, no skin was supposed to be showing, and get there at 6. So we arrived and we sat down and we recognized that most of the music was what we'd heard at our own church. So we were able to sing, but of course we were singing in English. And the Cunayala around us found that quite entertaining, and was very thrilled that, first of all, that we were participating. And in addition to that, so they had hymnals in Kuna. So she handed me the hymnal and brought it to the right page and showed us what we were to sing in Kuna. So Kuna is mostly a consonant-driven language, and the words are really long. And it was very hard to sing in Kuna, but we gave it our best try.
It was
And
like
they were
Muna la
so
la
great.
liba muna nina ma.
So they
And
were very
we were
appreciative
trying very hard, and they
of
were
us
howling.
participating. It was a 2-hour service, and Rick will talk more about it, but at the end, they all came around and wanted to meet us, and were very friendly.
One guy had a little tiny electric organ with a plug in it that ran down to a battery with alligator clips on the top, and that's how they played the organ. And the light over the preacher kept going out, and he kept whacking it so it would come back on again.
So half the service
it was
in
pretty
Spanish, half
entertaining.
in Kuna.
And then we were lucky enough to go and get to see what they call Congresso. Congresso is their Congress.
Their
So
government.
so they would have meetings there, and we were able actually to get inside, which is really rare. They usually don't let people in to see it, what's inside, and you're almost never able to attend. And we actually were asked if we,
Would like to attend.
to invited to attend. So we got in, and I actually tried to make a video or a thing of it. But what happens is, in the center you have these hammocks, and the elders would be in the hammocks,
There's 3.
and then all the people from the town would go in, and if you didn't show up, you'd be fined. And there was one guy sitting there doing this drone-like singing chant that went on in the background, while one of the other guys was reciting all the town rules. You know, you shouldn't fish your things or steal coconuts from your friend, and you don't ever look into someone else's hut, you know, because there's privacy, and the kids have to be home by 7:30, and, you know, they would go through the rules. And then after they were done, they would actually hold court, and their other grievances would come before the elders, and they would mete out punishments right then and there.
There's no
So-
police department, and there's no court system. That's it. So if you got something wrong, and you have a grievance that comes up during Congresso, and they will decide right then and there what your punishment is. And there's no jail. So usually the punishment is you can't leave the island. And
Yeah.
for some, that's pretty horrible. So what we found most fascinating is there was no crime. You felt safe. And we heard this alarm always go off at 7 o'clock at night. We came to find out that was the curfew bell. And you'd see all the kids scurrying. Everybody had to be home with family by 7 o'clock.
So it was really dark inside, and they had just a few lights inside while all this was going on. But all the women were sitting in their individual benches there with little headlights on, sewing their molas, you know, stitching away, because they weren't going to let just, you know, a meeting go to waste.
So men were allowed to come and go, which I thought was rather interesting. But if a woman wanted to leave, she had to go ask permission of the secretary if she could leave. And it is unfortunately a very still a very sexist society in that respect, but overall it's actually a matriarchal society, ironically. So when they get married, the man goes to live with the woman's family, and all of the families live in compounds. So the whole, like the aunts, uncles, the cousins, the grandparents, they all live together. And it's actually a beautiful way that they take care of each other. You don't have any elder care facilities. They all just take care of their elders.
So in walking around, we ran into the boatyard, and here was a new vessel under construction. So they were using axe, with the curved things to chip away at it, and machetes to create this out of a log, which they had dragged from the mainland over. And the guy on the right was heading out for Wednesday night sailing.
When Twilight Racing.
So we met people in town as we went ashore, and we got to know them. People would always come up to us and want to become our friend and our tour guide. So they would take us around the island and show us and everything, and then he'd bring us back to their house. And on the right-hand picture there, you'll see us there with the ancient grandmother sitting there, and she didn't want her face taken. Many of them wouldn't believe that when you take a picture of them, it steals part of their soul. So you have to either ask them, pay them, or they say yes, and so you have to know when to say no.
So the young man on the right in the green shirt, his name is Roxel. He actually teaches English at the schools, and he rotates from the various islands, and he will teach English a couple of days a week at each island for a couple of hours. And when he saw all of my children's National Geographic magazines, he was, can I have these please? I left him with an entire box of them. And what his hope, and what he planned on ripping out the pages because it would have the picture and the description. He could Xerox it and use it for his science lessons.
So we had brought boxes and boxes of school supplies and things, and Candy was doling them out as we went along our way, and it was really appreciated.
Some of the classes that we got to meet with the children.
So that was fun. And then on one island we
and
found
they have uniforms, which I thought was very interesting. They all wear uniforms, and all the schools are painted blue and white.
and it was very interesting to watch.
All the schools are painted the same color, so when we went to an island, I would know where the school was because it was painted blue and white.
Right. We saw the girls playing soccer, and all the girls were in Western T-shirts and shorts, but one girl was really trying to stay in the traditional Kuna attire, and she really wasn't playing soccer, but she was out with a whisk broom made of branches, sticks, wound together on a piece of wood, sweeping the thing so that the soccer area was clean. I mean, like hundreds of years into just stepping into the back in history. It was quite amazing. So we found this one hill where we could climb up through this sludgy, basically it's jungle.
It was a nice hike.
But it was ankle deep in mud and lots of bugs and things. But we finally got to the top, we could look down and see the boat in the harbor, which was pretty cool. But here's a traditional village. This is what it looks like. That's a wide street. A lot of really narrow, tiny streets between each of these huts.
No centralized water system. She was actually walking. There's like one spigot in the town, and everyone goes and gets the buckets of water there.
And you can see the solar panels there. So one house there had electricity. And sometimes at night you would see the glow of a TV through the thatched bamboo. Like crazy.
Of a TV. The government of Panama did 6 years ago invest money into putting to these 6 islands. They invested to put electricity using these solar panels, and the Kuniyala are not expected to pay for electricity, which is very nice. So it's just given to them.
But it's helping them move the forward into society. But many of the young kids are saying, whoa, all this good stuff out there in the rest of the world, why should I stay here? And that's where you start to see the problems with what's happening as they become more westernized.
What we came to notice is that we would see a lot of abandoned homes, and we couldn't figure out why. And yet we also wondered why there was no foreigners there. We came to find out that there's a law. You can't buy a house in Kuniyala. No foreign investment is allowed. The only way you get a house in Kuniyala is to have it handed down to you by your family. So it gets passed from family to family to family, and you can't buy it, and you can't have any sort of investment there. So you will never see any foreigners.
So on the really populated islands, there were a few, and they would have, you can see, they took up every inch of the ground. The only time that there was an open space, whether it was a soccer field or a town area where they would have meetings and things. This one island actually was attached by a bridge to the mainland. They had 110, or they had electricity. So it was one of the few that actually had running water and electricity coming down from the mainland. But you can see it was The guy who we met came out in his little ulu here. He lived in this hut with his family and about 8 people right along the water, and he was a fisherman. And
He befriended us and took us around the town, showed us where the right bodegas were to get food. And I said to him, because we had the dinghy at the time, I said, I really want to ride in an ulu. He says, come on. So he gave me a ride in an ulu.
And it was great. So we went along to other islands, and we found one where they had a communally owned restaurant, and everyone would take turns running it. So the chefs were all cooking in, and we're cooking our meal up, and then it was their turn to go off duty, so the music stopped. He took his phone with him and he left. So we were then trying to get their Wi-Fi or get to so we could stream the music. But we got tours of the island, and he was a wonderful a certified tour guide, and his wife also did molas. So every time he gives you a tour of the island, we get up, and the big exciting thing was we're going to go to the top of the mountain, and at the top of the mountain is a cell tower. That was their great big thing on the island. So and of course his tour came down from there and ended up at his house where you could then peruse his wife's molas. So, he had it all settled.
But you're not allowed to have commercialism there. So that restaurant is owned by the island, and they all take turns running it. It's not owned by any individual.
And
The best octopus dinner we ever had.
Who's that little citizen?
Oh, just a little tiny frog. Just the tiniest little frog, a special kind of frog that's only in...
We were hiking, I just saw him, I picked him up, put him on my hand.
Yeah. That's the one they dip their poison spears into.
So you're going to tell a story about that?
So we were looking out from the shoreline there after dinner, and we're saying, wow, it's beautiful. And we see this very big log going upstream. And when we looked carefully, we realized it was a 12-foot alligator, going up. So that was not, or crocodile. It was, told us we're not supposed to be swimming there, because you're in the jungle. I mean, you really are.
I believe alligators are in America and crocodiles are in Australia.
Yeah, there you are. So here was
We're
an
gonna fly
island.
through these.
Yeah, here was an island where the family, grandma would stay on the island. The kids would all come and take turns running the island, rent out little houses and things on it for day stayers. But one kid was the head of his soccer team at back on the mainland, and he would run soccer ball through the palm
He set up
trees
an
to
obstacle
practice.
course on the island to keep in shape for the soccer. He was captain of the soccer team.
So here, just more beautiful islands and all. So then we came back to Shelter Bay, and we had to fuel up. Their idea of a fuel dock is a tugboat that has tanks of diesel in it, so you get filled up by the tugboat. We set the spinnaker and started sailing down back to the Panama Canal. So we joined up with the boat we were going to raft up with to go through the Panama Canal. We had to rent all the fenders and 4 200-foot lines. And
You can't
then
go through on your own when we're that small. It's just the space. It's 1,000 feet long. It's 110 feet wide. Actually, they just opened the second canal, but that's only for the huge cruise ships and the huge freighters. So we were going through the original canal, and they made us buddy up with another sailboat.
So you get an advisor on board your boat. So they come out with this big aluminum motor launch and land the advisor on your boat, and then he stays with you for the duration or through the individual canals. So what we did is we broke it into 2 days. We went through the first batch of canals one night, then spent the night on Lake Gatun, which is the lake in the middle, and then another advisor came out the next day, met us at the crack of dawn. We had to race through the lake and come up to the next sets of locks, and then finally get through to the Pacific.
There's 3 main locks, and each lock has 3 sections because you have to go up 90 feet, and each lock is 30 feet. And you have to have 5 people on board. So you have 2 fore, 2 aft, and then you have the captain, and then you have the advisor. So we sort of ran into a bit of a conflict because our crew, the kids, decided they had enough. They were bored and wanted to go home.
Oh.
Not enough
Not enough
Wi-Fi.
internet, not enough parties, it was too boring.
Not enough
How
young
long did they
people.
last?
You couldn't kiteboard in Cunayala,
No
and you
drone.
can't fly a drone because they have rules
And
that
there's no
say
Wi-Fi.
if the indigenous people can't have it or don't have it, you can't have it either. And that was like all the reason they came was to go kiteboarding in paradise. So
So we lost them, and we had to find more crew. And so that's when I reached out to friends in Reading, and Georgina and Paula said, we're on our way. And they flew down literally within a couple of days, and they were the rest of our crew.
So we went through the canal, and going through the canal at night, we rafted up with this other boat, and and went in, and we were behind an 800-foot freighter. So, behind us, the canals would slowly fill in, and then the water would bubble up inside. And what happened is the guys on the top of the canal would have a monkey's fist and a small line, and they would heave this thing down and heave it to your boat, and you had to tie your dock line onto it, and they'd hoist it back up, and they would put that on the bollards, and then you would pull your line tight, had to have it around the cleats, so that as the water came in, you wouldn't get rushed from one side to the other or up against the shore.
Of the lock, and literally as the water's rushing in, you're just going back and forth trying to keep your boat from hitting the side of the locks.
So here we were coming in, and and it was really pretty amazing. One of these is a movie. Yeah. So as we were going through, the double set of locks closed behind us, and then once we're in a little bit further, then here's the water comes lurching in from the bottom in whirlpools, and the boat starts lurching. I had to use a little power to hold the thing in place. So you've got to stay in the middle because you get washed away.
Candy. Not the one you thought.
Candy.
They literally will be at the top of the canal, and they're just walking us along. They'll just walk, and they're pulling the boat. So
They're just holding the dock line,
100 years
walking
ago,
along.
it's
We were
still the same
motoring
way.
through the canal and just would go from stop to stop to stop. And then as the water came in, we'd go, then they'd open the next lock, and then we're through. So this was probably, at 8 or 9 o'clock at night as we were going through.
It took 3 hours to get through just the first 3 sets of the first lock.
And here's the chart going through, so you can kind of see where you come in at the top left and then go through into the lake. And then the next day we had to do the rush through the lake and then
26
through
miles
the
through
other
the
end. And then come down, and the locks are huge. I mean, it's just amazing. Everything is super sized. So here we were going down along the channel, and the advisor kept saying, "Stay way over by the buoys. Stay way over by the buoys. You got to get over more." And I'm like snaking right along the edge of the channel, right by the buoys, because there are 800 and 900 foot ships passing us inside the thing, and they're doing 14 knots. They're roaring through because they get through in a couple of hours. Where we're taking overnight to do it. And on the right-hand side, these are some of what they had to dig to make the canal, and hundreds of people lost their lives here, digging this and doing this. And it was really amazing when you're inside there to look up and just try to get, understand the immensity of all of this. It was really, really nice. So here we were coming up to some of the last locks. This is Pedro Miguel. There's the guy holding our dock lines up at the top, so he drops it over the bollard. And then in behind us comes a ship. And our advisor says, "Hey, be ready to let your lines run if you have to." And we turned around and said, "Why is that?" And he said, "In case he doesn't stop." So he was 800 feet. So here we were, in place, ready to go. And my sister, I had been texting her that we're almost through, take a look. And she went on the Panama Canal webcams and was able to snap a shot of us in the canal. So that's us down in front of the ship.
There's Independence.
Yeah.
There's Lakota.
Those little things down there were us, and that monster ship behind us. And I had no concept how big this ship was. So
what happened?
no, so they opened the gate and they stopped, thank God, and they opened the gate and we were on our way through.
Interestingly, when in one of the locks where the freighter was in front of us and we were in the back, the pilot yelled to me and said, "You have to really hold on tight when we start leaving." He says, because the backwash from the freighter would be so significant that it would throw
He's going to
boat
start moving
everywhere.
and using power, and he's going to wash it back on us. And I'm using the throttle. I've got it half throttle trying to hold in place, and they've got the lines tight, just trying to hold us in place till he moved on, and then we could move up ahead behind him. So here was at the last lock. I'm saying, wow, we finally made it. The last lock opened, and the Pacific Ocean awaits. So, and at this point, my heart's pounding, I'm almost ready to cry, and I'm saying, man, there's no turning back now. So here we were, and we went down to the far side of Panama this area at the bottom right on the chart is called Balboa, and that's where Old Panama City is. Balboa is the old city, going back to the 1500s of Panama. So we said goodbye to our advisors. We turned back in the fenders and buoys. We went to a yacht club. We picked up a mooring, and we went out on the town. So we went out to a rooftop bar overlooking the old city of Panama, and it was unbelievable. The new Panama City is like, it was like looking at the Oz in the distance. It was really unbelievable. But the old city was beautiful, antique city, and with beautiful cathedrals and things. And some of the buildings there were back from the 1500s. It was just amazing. And the next day was my birthday, so Candy got me a birthday present. So up on one of the rooftop bars, these were the hostesses, and Candy bribed them to come, say hello. So we had a wonderful dinner out in this eclectic restaurant. There were people driving around this was a cruising bar where you sit on the seat and pedal, and you are the power for the bar to move around town. And
They're playing music and mixing drinks.
and the guy in the middle is mixing drinks, while you pedal it. But you can see the ruins go back to 500 years old. We just missed their 500th anniversary, and they had huge celebration and things. And then we left Panama City, and we went out for Las Perlas Islands, which are little islands on the outside of the back of Panama on the canal.
It's the playground of the Panamanians, the rich Panamanians.
So the rich and famous go there. And we found that we were ready for more palm trees and everything else. This was very rocky, not as hospitable, hard to anchor, but filled with whales and sea life. So we would go through a little channel, and there would be whales swimming right by us on either side. We found beaches where we'd have to come in with a dinghy, but there were 15-foot tides, so you really had to play where you were leaving your dinghy, or else you're going to get stuck on the beach for the day. So we dropped our friends Paula and Georgina off at this really nice hotel on one of the islands, and they were going to fly off the island back into Panama City and then home. So this was their, and we were actually lucky enough to be able to get a room there for the night.
The airport is an international airport. It had one runway, and the chef was the pilot.
So you can see. So then, now we said goodbye to them, so now it's just two of us on the boat. So we had looked in the cruising guide and found this really nice little harbor where they say you can go in and anchor, and if you go ashore, you can walk through the woods and over to the other side where there are beautiful beaches and beautiful waves all crashing in on the beach. And we thought, okay, that would be great. So we get there, and a gunboat comes out and starts yelling at us, "You can't be here, you can't be here, leave now." And we're like, wait, we've got a cruising permit. We can stay here. No, go now. So, very well. It turns out the cruising guide was way out of date, and they built a maximum security prison there. These were the guards off the shore, and this was Panama's Guantanamo Bay. Okay, so
which we just happened to be in the wrong place.
Yeah, we were at the very wrong place. So we went down along the coast to the next town, and we anchored off this town, and it was amazing because there, all the guys with the pangas would come in from fishing for the day, and since the tide was so low, they would roar in at 30 knots straight up onto the beach, pull their engines up, and coast up on the beach, on the sand, and then tie their boat off, and that's how they'd leave the boat for the night.
Wait for the water to come in and collect them the next day that float out.
So wherever we went, we were always greeted by someone who wanted to be our tour guide and become our friend because they were hoping to sell a little something or maybe get a tip. So we befriended this guy.
We befriended this gentleman, and I'd heard also that on the other side of this island was very beautiful. So he said he knew the way. So we went on our way, and this trail went deeper and deeper into the jungle. And at one point, all of a sudden, he brings us to a mangrove area. And the fishermen, it was their secret path to get to the other side. They actually cut a hole with their machetes through the mangroves. As you can see him taking us through there, we walked through this tunnel in the mangroves and got to the other side. But I remember saying to Rick, geez, this is the part of the story where the guy comes out with the machete and it becomes one of those horror movies. We did have a very trusting nature as I look back. And when we were coming back, the gentleman brought us to the cemetery, and I thought, oh, this is not good.
He's like, come, I need to show you. You know.
And so he takes us in and he wanted to show us where his family burial plot was. He felt that we were very nice family people and he wanted to show us.
So he brings us and he points down and he says, my father.
Papa. So
You know,
very nice.
I mean, so those were the type of people that we were meeting. It was amazing. So one of these boats comes skidding up onto the beach, filled with people and stuff. They all come piling out. They take white burlap bags and dump the contents out onto the beach, and the contents were chickens that were like awash in the bottom of the bilge, and
This
the
was
chickens
actually
are
the
all
shopping
struggling back, and this is how they're bringing produce into their
The
island.
boat had taken this group of people to the mainland to get food and stuff, and then this is the way to get food, so they brought it all back.
And they had 55-gallon drums of gasoline in the boat, and everybody's smoking, and, you know, they come flying up the beach. I mean, it was crazy.
So for those of us that want to clean the bottoms of our boats, the way they do it there is they leave the boat up, and when the water all recedes, they push the boat onto its side, and they whip out their machetes, and they just whack all of the barnacles off the boat, and that's how they clean them. They bring it back over and wait for the water to come back up again. So that's how they clean the bottoms of their boats.
And here you can see two of the kids in a ulu
selling
who came
us.
over selling fish or selling something. So one of the tour books said there was a wreckage of a submarine, and we were able to find this cast iron submarine up on the
The
beach.
first single man
Yeah.
steel?
The guy was trying to sell it to the military, and nobody bought it, so we beached
just
it
left
and
it.
left it and walked away. So we found some islands and had our own private little beaches. There were whales everywhere. As we were sailing in and out, you know, or we would be ghosting into a little place to anchor, and the whales would just be going in and out by us. At
was
one
a- it
point,
was
the
nobody
dinghy
there. It was
the
hardly
dinghy
anybody.
got stuck up the beach a little far, so we got really ingenious and grabbed all the logs we could and piled them up down the beach and created our own ways. So we would run from the bow to the stern and throw down another log and pull the dinghy 6 more feet and just kept running the logs down, and we got back in the water. We met some other cruisers who came aboard, you know, wanted to spend some adult time because they had 2 little kids with them on the boat, and they just couldn't wait to have some adult time.
This was actually one of the islands where they had just finished filming Survivor. So,
Yeah. So, and we ran into this guy who was the manager of a bed and breakfast, and Candy said, "We've got to do laundry. We've
need
got
to
to do
sleep
some
on the
shopping.
land."
I would really, really like to sleep in a real bed." So we went, and she found this place, and this guy befriended us and became our tour guide / chauffeur / whatever in his golf cart all around the island. Pretty incredible.
he's from Nigeria, and he's so looking forward to joining us when we do our Africans.
So when we're sleeping on the boat, I feel the boat's jerking, and I'm thinking, wow, we've wrapped the anchor chain on a bommy or something there. You know, when we get back from snorkeling, I've got to go see what's going on. So I dive down, and of course, the night before, I knew I'd have to go snorkeling, and I had like my worst case scenario dreams going on in my head for most of the night. So I dive down, get down to 20 feet, look down, and sure enough, there's a sunken boat with a deck ripped off the boat, and our anchor chain is wrapped around the bow, cutting down into the fiberglass of the bow. So I come up and said, let's get out the dive stuff. So I rig out all the diving equipment, get everything going. Candy's on the deck. I go down and I start trying to pull the chain out of the fiberglass. I'm peeling the fiberglass away. These are not the real pictures. I was way too busy to take pictures, so I found some pictures. So I just have to clarify that. But I was able to pull the fiberglass away, get the thing out, string the chain along the side of the boat, come back up to Candy, and she's like, "I saw a lot of bubbles. I'm glad to see you're alive." And she pulled the anchor up, and then we moved a couple hundred yards off. So, I mean, what happens is there are still drug things going on, and what the guys do is they deliver the drugs in, they do their delivery, and they sink the boat. And we probably just got hooked on a sunken boat because it was like a 35-foot power boat. So that was fun. So we left Las Perlas, which are in the middle, and we went down along the Panamanian coast towards Colombia, towards what they call the Darien Gap. So this is
Still in
where,
Panama.
yeah, we're still in Panama, and this is where we go inland, and this is going like into the jungles, into the serious jungles.
Into the river areas.
So you can see on the right, that's our actual course is going up the 3 different rivers. And the one in the middle, in the tour guide, they showed bare-breasted women in grass skirts and guys wearing loincloths, and all this with jewelry around their necks and everything. And Candy's like, we've got to go there. We've got to go there. She wanted to see the guy in the loincloth. And we get there, and it's like seriously cowboy city. They're all ranchers and farmers, and they're living on horses and things.
They're 400 miles from the closest Pan American highway. Actually runs all the way down into the Darien Gap, which, by the way, Darien, Connecticut, is named after
the Darien Gap. Because you had the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Pacific on the other, and this was the area between them. And then when they were trying to name Darien here, they said, well, a seaman, they were trying to come up with a name, a guy who had been offshore said, hey, you should name it Darien because it's the same thing. You're stuck between two cities, Stamford and Norwalk, and you could be Darien in the middle, and it's stuck, and that's where the name came from.
That actually is in the historic books if you want to check.
So
the river in the middle is called Rio Cucunati, and we were able to get the boat up into that top section there, and pretty much we couldn't go any further because, again, the tides were horrific. So we thought, well, the dinghy should be able to get further along. We knew we had to go further up to get to this community.
And you can see the water actually goes further up in, but it's so tidal that we had to leave when the tide changed, follow it all the way up. The first day we didn't time it right. Then the second day we timed it and went all the way up the river and got there.
Dinghy all the way up into the mangroves, and we finally literally made it at the end of the tide because we had to drag the dinghy the last few hundred yards.
But before we got there, we had to get rid of our friend. So Paul the persistent pelican that decided he was going to land on the boat because the only boats he was used to seeing were fishing boats. And we had no fish. We had nothing to give him. But he was absolutely, set on landing on the boat. So he landed on the boat. I would spray him with the saltwater wash down. I would poke at him on the back with the boat hook, and ultimately I put out a big boom box and I played techno Das Punk music really loud. And he was shaking and we couldn't tell if he was dancing or he really hated the music. But eventually he flew away. And he stayed a couple hundred yards away and was like, we're like, don't you even think about it. So while we were in this little estuary here, in the middle of the night we would hear whoosh, and we're like, what is that? So we go out with the big flashlights, and there was a single dolphin in that estuary fishing. And he was circling around our boat and fishing everywhere we went. And when we got to talk to all the fishermen and got to know people, they said, oh, yeah, that's Solo. He's here all the time. And they've named him Solo. So going up the river, we raced our way up and barely made it before the tide changed, and then the river would dry out. So here's high tide and low tide on the river. And they would leave their boats up high and dry. And on the right-hand picture, that's two guys carrying a 60-horse outboard on a 2x6 over their shoulders to change it from one boat to another. I mean, this is really seriously, going back in time.
They're all fishermen or ranchers.
So here's the school, and they had
loincloth guys. It's really a community of ranchers and fishermen, and they had the blue and white school.
And here's the cowboy bar with the horse outside, and we went inside and had a beer.
Payphone. The only way you communicate outside of the town was with this one payphone, and it had a solar panel to make it work.
And we met a guy there who took us on tours, and befriended us, said, I'll take you to our family house. He took us up to the top of the hill. From the top of the hill, we could see our boat in the river. But he owned 3,000 cattle, and they were all on these hillsides, and they were the richest family in town. And he brought us back to his house and fed us a pork and potato soup. And it was just phenomenal to meet them. And Candy had brought a bunch of kids' school things with them, including bubbles. And the little girls had never seen bubble blow. So they were just in heaven, seeing something they'd never imagined before.
And they were very excited to show me their English-speaking books.
So you can see the town, and they would deliver gasoline to the Pangas in a yellow taxi cab truck, where they would drive 2.5 hours to go pick up gas and bring it back so they could go fishing for 2 or 3 days. Wow. And these guys would go offshore for 2 or 3 days. So you can see the navigation here is not so good. On the left-hand side, the yellow is our path, and that's where the chart shows the opening. So we were in the middle of the channel and in 60 feet of water, but the chart had us going through the land. So we ended up at this one city La Palma, and this is another you could pass on at city. It was very industrial, very rough around the edges. We just filled up with what food they had, which wasn't a lot, and got diesel. And when we were up there trying to fuel up, we took a taxi truck up to the gas station. Well, the gas station was like this warehouse, and as we went in, we recognized, they had tanks and things, but
You had to find the right taxi to get to the gas station, because again, it was who you knew. And you had to trust the person, because the ride to this building, it was an abandoned warehouse, was way into the residential area, and it was another one of those "are we crazy" moments. But when we finally, and he pulled up to this building, and there's just a door there, it wasn't until we went inside where this young man was actually filtering fuel and cleaning it, and it was a legitimate gas station. That's how they managed it. So I went inside to take this picture, and I had my purse in the car. So we came back out, and he drove us back to the marina, and we said, "How much is the taxi ride?" He said, $2. I said, "Gee, that's reasonable." And when I went back into my purse, $200 was missing. So he obviously had helped himself to my purse by the moment that I came out to take that picture.
so
we
that
got
was
hoodwinked on that
pretty
one.
frustrating, But you learn. So then it was time to leave that portion of Panama, and we had to go outside of Colombia. So we were trying to stay about 100 miles or more off of Colombia, because that's where the pirates and the drug runners are. So, but out in the middle there's an island, and you've got to stay 15 miles away from the island, because it's owned by, I don't know, or Colombia, but it's a military reservation, and you're not allowed to go near it. And if you do, you have to announce yourself on the radio, and they come out and get you. So we were trying to avoid it. But this was all upwind and into the current, and so it was a long, hard slog. So that was 8 days, 675 miles upwind against the current. We were tacking 100 miles offshore, and at some points we had net lines where they were fishing. They dropped these nets from their pangas with little tiny flags on them, and we're sailing, and all of a sudden the boat goes and stops dead. So it went down our keel and hung up on our rudder. So I'm there with the boat hook trying to push their lines of their nets off the rudder to get free. So we had fun, and as we went down, we finally came to Bahia de Caracas in Ecuador, where we were to leave the boat. So Bahia on the chart looks like it's fairly well protected, and they say on their guidebooks and everything, you got to call in advance, we'll send out a pilot, and you meet the pilot in the designated waiting area, and the pilot will lead you in. Well, we said, okay, that's going to be great. Well, we didn't know that with the wind blowing on shore, the pilot was going to take us precariously close inside of those two greenish islands just by the rock pile around the point. And so all of a sudden we're coming in, and we're seeing that we're having to go through this surf. So all of a sudden we're surfing the boat, and the guy's going faster, faster, faster. And I've got the boat pegged, and I said to Candy, hang on. And she's down on the deck holding on with her fingernails. And we're surfing down the waves, trying to keep the boat from broaching. And then whoosh, we're around the corner and inside this beautifully protected river. And that's where the boat is now. So we know when we leave, we're leaving at no wind, high tide, early in the morning before the wind has a chance to build up.
Boats weren't meant to serve.
Yeah.
Sailboats weren't meant to serve.
So this place has been a good hideout, and many of the people that we've actually followed on YouTube of people sailing around the world have all stopped there. So we were in good company. But
It's a bit deceptive. I mean, it used to be a resort town, and it was a very popular place to go. It got hit with 2 horrific earthquakes in 2016. All the buildings you see there now are just shells. There's nothing in them. They're empty. It's a very depressing, run-down, poverty-ridden town, and you have to be very careful with a lot of crime there. Not the safest place to be.
So we put the boat on a mooring, and then ultimately they moved us in closer to the mooring. But the marina is owned by an expat U.S. ex-military guy who knows everybody in town and is friends even with government officials in Ecuador. So the boat's out on a mooring, and they have guards that come out every 15 minutes with flashlights and circle the boats at night, so we know the boat's in good shape. And we had run into a family in town. We were in the supermarket line, and they were Americans who had been cruising who have settled in Ecuador, and they befriended us and invited us to their compound along the water. And he just recently texted me and said, "Hey, you want me to go check your boat?" And he went down and checked the boat, and we're in good place. Everything's still working, and batteries are fully charged. Everything's happy. So I feel much better. So then, that's kind of the end of the water trip. So we've got just 2 or 3 slides of what else we did. We then hopped on to these buses called the Ecuador Hop Bus, which is not very much like a Eurail bus or pass, where you pay $200. You can go anywhere in Ecuador for a year. So we went from city to city to city, and Candy had our itinerary planned out like to the minute. But we climbed volcanoes, we went to monkey preserves, we met indigenous natives, we went to these beautiful, beautiful valleys with the city down below.
Thermal pools.
We met so many local people and everything. And then we decided also we were going to go through Peru. So we went down to the Peru border and went into Peru, found all the condors flying. I mean, that's a real picture that we took. We were up at 15,000 feet and taking pictures of the condors. There were 300-foot sand dunes along the coastline because it's very dry and arid, and they had dune buggy rides, so we're doing dune buggy rides. The cathedrals and the cities and everything were so beautiful. We did an overnight stay on Lake Titicaca, where we went out in reed boats and got to tour the parts of Lake Titicaca, dressed in native costumes, and had a wild party with them. Just a wonderful time. And then we finished up in Peru with Candy's bucket list item, hiking Machu Picchu. 4 days, 3 nights, up 10,000 feet, down 2,000 feet, up 5,000 feet, down 3,000 feet, and finally there.
You camp 3 nights and you do the hike. It's about 6 miles a day, so it's.
And it was seriously the most physically challenging thing I've ever done in my life. You've got cocoa leaves stuck into your cheeks, chewing on them. You'd see this particularly rough climb coming up ahead of you. You would chew really hard and take a good swallow, get this really good rush, and then do the 100 steps, and then pant for 45 seconds.
Apparently, if you have a blood test, you test positive for cocaine.
But everywhere you go, they have cocoa leaves, and every hotel, every place we stayed.
Adjust your body. But we were there a week in advance to try and do the altitude.
But the travel was incredible because a dinner was $6 of setting for us. Bottles of wine were like $4 and $5. Beer was $1, and the hotels were $20 to $35 a night. So traveling was incredible.
But we were very lucky on this tour because it was near the end of the season. We were the only people on the tour. So we had our own 4 Sherpas, we had the chef and the guide all to ourselves. And Marco is his name. He has become a friend of ours. He came to visit us when we were in Peru. He was a chef. We ended up cooking meals together, and he also plans on joining us on the boat at some point. So we've made some amazing friendships on this trip, and I can't tell you, we've far exceeded our expectations. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and I'm thrilled to have been able to share it with you tonight.
So we're supposed to be going down through the South Pacific and heading for New Zealand for the America's Cup. But COVID ended all of that. So we've had to postpone everything by a year because there's a window in the South Pacific that you've got to get out of when there's typhoon season because we're not covered under a named storm, just like hurricane season here. So we were planning our trip. So we're going to try and hit when Candy's finished her tax season and all in April next year. We're going to try and head off to get the bottom done on the boat in Ecuador, then head to Galapagos, then from Galapagos to Easter Island to Pitcairn, and then into the South Pacific. Then we'll ditch out someplace and leave the boat for 3 months and come back home for work, and then go back into the South Pacific, do some more, and then ultimately end up in Australia. Then Indonesia and follow around, and then we'll be back to do another seminar.
On the map there.
That sounds fabulous.
So follow us on cruisingindependence.com is our webpage. So we've got everything there, and we're breaking it into chunks, so we've got lots of pictures and everything else. But if you're interested, we're always looking for crew members to fly in and meet us, either to make a long trip offshore, which we always could use help with, or if you want to fly in and just savor the Polynesian treats, that works too.
We're actually very lucky. There's a lot of sailors that are out there right now that are having a tough time trying to manage. And so we're very blessed to be home and would love anyone who wants to join us on our next thing. So thank you for coming.
Wow.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Any questions?
Oh my gosh. Too many.
Was
It's
it
just
What's a
fabulous.
mola?
impressions?
What's a mola? I mean, it's
Actually, yeah, walk around with it a little bit.
What's she
This is
wearing?
all
She's
Is it
wearing.
a
hand-
blouse?
It's just embroidery.
Oh, it's embroidered.
I see, yes.
It's they overlay different layers of cloth and stitch it with thousands and millions of little tiny stitches and have all the different colored fabric.
Where did they get
They
their
just get
fabric?
these things.
They get it from the mainland, and they just, I saw them with like rags and with rolls of fabric and stuff, and they would cut it apart and then cut all the tracings and things. The
She buys the top and then she.
very intricate work. And you know, it occurred to me when we were heading there, I wish I had known, I would have brought giveaway glasses and used glasses, because some of these ladies, there was one little old lady, she was doing her molas, and her molas were just not so wonderful. And she's like, here, $25. I'm like, no, it's okay. You know, and she says, $15? And I realized she was desperate to sell her molas, but her eyesight was going and her stitching was really off. So I said, oh no, I'll buy it for me. And I gave her the 25, and she came over and hugged me and started crying because she just needed the income. You know, but that's where you are, and that's why we're there. So, you know, they were giving us their lives, and we were sharing ours too. So it was wonderful.
So did I get it right? When you went to the canal, you were rafted up? That's a requirement?
Yeah, you raft up with
And
someone
what's
else.
the reason for that?
Well, because they
Space.
won't you let one boat when they can have two or three.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll have a workboat in the middle with two yachts on either side. Sometimes they'll just raft up two yachts together. We were going through at a really odd time. There were almost no yachts going through when we went through. Sometimes when they do the arc, they'll have the whole flotilla go through, where they'll have 100 boats, 4 deep in the canal, all going through at the same time. But we were off season coming through, trying to get down and knowing we were going to have to ditch the boat. So
I mean, it sounds like it's one thing to be worried about your boat jostling around. Now you got a partner here alongside,
Yeah.
and they're jostling.
well, and the advisor's saying, oh, put fenders on both sides of the boat. And I'm like, really? Why both sides? He says, because if that line goes free, we're going to be up against the bulkhead, and you don't want to trash the side of your boat.
Right.
So, yeah.
And
Yeah.
one boat is the lead boat engine-wise, and so Independence had a stronger engine. So Lakota's boat, Rick's boat, we were the one that was guiding this side to side. Otherwise, you'd have two engines
Right.
fighting each other. So.
Yeah, and there were times we were actually tandeming it, saying, okay, one you
You
go
would
forward,
forward.
I go reverse, and we were clocking the boats around,
Yeah.
like a big twin screw, motor yacht. So it was an adventure. It was really amazing, and it was everything I've dreamt about. I mean, I started dreaming about this when I was 15, and and it's taking my whole life to get here, and now I can say it's especially the Sound Blast have absolutely lived up to everything I had ever hoped it would be. So, and it's nice to be doing it with a really, really old friend.
Careful.
Oh, no. A friend from old, I'm sorry.
What is your website again, or your?
Cruisingindependence.com.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much for being
Oh,
patient.
fantastic.
Really nice.
We will need to write something for the blog,
Jonathan
right?
was just gonna put something on the
Yeah,
blog.
something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very
Was the
cool.
stuff I was sending you, is that
Yeah.
okay? Or no?
Yeah.
Because I only recently got